So the briefing is the big story in Washington for political reporters most days, but the big story for almost every American is their own situation, the economy, what's going on with their bank account, their family, and more than 4 million Americans filed for unemployment last week, and since mid-March, more than 26 million people have been laid off or furloughed, and the Washington Post noted that jobless figures on this scale have not been seen since the Great Depression. Congress responded to this economic pain by passing a $484 billion aid package this week. Here's what you need to know. In short, it includes $300 billion for the depleted small business lending program. It has $75 billion for hospitals, and it includes $25 billion for virus testing. Absent from the deal was the $500 billion sought by governors, many of them facing budget shortfalls. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, a Republican, firmly opposed that request, sparking fury from some governors. And as states grapple with these challenges and look to jumpstart their economies, some governors, like Democrat Andrew Cuomo of New York, are proceeding with caution. Cuomo was at the White House with the president this week.
Frankly, this is no time to act stupidly, period. I get the pressure, I get the politics, we can't make a bad decision, and we can't be stupid about it. This is not going to be over anytime soon.
And others, like Republican Brian Kemp of Georgia, are plowing ahead with plans to reopen restaurants, barbershops, and other businesses. Governor Kemp's move came after pressure from conservatives and drew a rebuke from Atlanta's mayor and health experts, and this from President Trump.
I told the governor of Georgia, Brian Kemp, that I disagree strongly with his decision to open certain facilities which are in violation of the Phase 1 guidelines. At the same time, he must do what he thinks is right. I want him to do what he thinks is right. But I disagree with him on what he's doing.
Nancy, how much of a hard line is McConnell, the majority leader, taking on this upcoming negotiation? Will he yield at some point on aid to states? We have seen him back away from some of his positions in these previous rounds of talks.
I think you're really onto something there, Robert. You've watched him conduct these negotiations in the past, and he's a savvy negotiator, and he knows that if he stakes out a bargaining position in the beginning where it looks like it's only Democrats who want this state funding, that then he can go ahead and give it to them and then say, well, I've given you what you want, and now here's what I want. When the reality is, frankly, that many Republicans, along with Democrats, know that states are going to need another bailout. I mean, their revenue is shrinking rapidly, even as they are spending more to combat this crisis, and Democratic and Republican governors alike are beating down the door telling Congress that they are going to need these funds. So I'm not sure that McConnell is going to stick to this position, but clearly as Congress kind of revs up for the next big negotiation over a CARES 2 package or Phase 4, whatever you want to call it, that is going to be a big part of it. And he's trying to find a negotiating position that's going to enable him to get the things he wants in that package at the end of the day.
Tolu, you just filed the story for the Post about Governor Kemp and President Trump. What is the real story behind the scenes? He's aligned with the president, yet now at odds with the president.
Yeah, Governor Kemp really owes a lot of his governorship to President Trump's endorsement. He was able to propel himself to the top of the ticket on the Republican primary back in 2018 thanks to Trump. But since he took office, he's clashed with the president on a number of issues, including his appointment of Kelly Loeffler as the new senator in Georgia. President Trump wanted his fierce defender, Doug Collins, a representative, to be appointed to that Senate seat. And now we see them clashing over the opening up of Georgia. President Trump actually seemed to be very much in favor of the fact that Georgia was going to open up very aggressively and very quickly as late as last week and early this week. But after there was some pushback to Governor Kemp's announcement that spas and tattoo parlors and bowling alleys would be included, and some of the medical experts said that was not in line with what they had recommended. That was actually in direct contrast to President Trump's own guidelines, which the president at times has seemed somewhat unfamiliar with. The president decided to publicly rebuke Governor Kemp, surprising the governor's aides. This is something that the governor was not expecting after speaking to President Trump. But he criticized him on Wednesday. He doubled down on it on Thursday, saying he was not happy with how Governor Kemp was handling this. We reported at the Washington Post that President Trump had called Governor Kemp and asked him to modify his order or take off some of the spas and nail salons. And Governor Kemp declined. He said that he was going to move forward. And that clash is continuing between a top Republican governor and the Republican president.
What about the clash, Jeremy, in the activist ranks? You've covered the Tea Party for years, and you just said earlier in the show about this being a culture war. We saw thousands at the Wisconsin State Capitol Friday. Is there a new Tea Party type movement emerging on the right to pressure some of these governors?
Yeah, I think there absolutely is an element of the conservative base that is unhappy with these restrictions. I think, though, the question is, like, what type of conservatism does that represent? And is that brand of conservatism dead because of the coronavirus? And I think this is something I hear a lot of my sources talking about. The answer is free market conservatism right now is on life support. It's an ideology that Republicans have really no use for, and there's almost zero political will from the people to see those types of policies enacted. Small government, free market conservatism really has no role in this type of environment. And so when you see these protesters, yes, you're right, there are thousands in Michigan, Kentucky, there were hundreds.
But you're
Colorado,
right, they've been pretty small. They've been pretty small.
By and large, they have been pretty small and really fringy. If you look at the crowds, it's people waving Confederate flags, carrying semi-automatic weapons. This is not an outpouring like we saw, like you and I covered in 2009 and 2010. I do think, though, there is a difference between that type of uprising and revolt, which is fairly contained, and the type that you could see slowly bubbling up. I wouldn't quite call it a revolt, but I would say, as people have described it to me, patience is fraying. There are people who have been home now for weeks. Their kids are getting
They're getting restless. They're getting
Exactly.
restless.
And this is
exactly. Hey, Jeremy, give me 1 second here. We just want to get Shannon in real quick. Speaking of all the fight on the right, Shannon, we see the president pushing ahead on immigration. Is that going to continue with more executive orders? We only have about 30 seconds left.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was a way to get the topic back into his comfortable turf. Right now, he had wanted to be talking about things like immigration, and he can't because of coronavirus. So it was a way to get the conversation back on his friendly turf on a #1 issue for Republicans, and to also paint this theoretical picture of a future where there are so many jobs that immigrants are flooding here to get them. It's part of that hope, spin the thing forward and make people think that things are going to be better than reality actually indicates they will be.